Hey everybody, Tim Anderson here, aka Renville. Welcome back to the latest Tim's Tabletop Tips episode. And today we're going to be diving into VTT or Virtual Tabletop. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the various virtual tabletop programs and which one might work for you. Again, this one comes after one of my longtime friends that I've known since I was a teenager, Dave, had left a comment on one of these videos and had said that one of the challenges for him and his family getting into things was not necessarily knowing all of the resources available to start playing, especially in the times of the pandemic. And I myself was somewhat of a novice to VTT at the beginning of the pandemic, and now that we're a couple years deep now, we've been using Fantasy Grounds heavily over the past few months. I'd like to say that I'm pretty fairly versed in the topic now, and we're going to be talking about that in today's episode. If this is your first time here, awesome. Welcome aboard. Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll smash that like button, join the channel, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all those good things so that you get future updates on all things that we do here on YouTube. There's a lot of stuff, lots of different topics and playlists. Obviously, I do DM lots of campaigns. I've created two different worlds. I've been playing this for 30 plus years. I created the world of Saga of Lucemia as a D&D campaign, which then became an MMORPG. And then, of course, we have what we're working on right now, which is the world of the Weave and the Void, which is a 5th edition tabletop setting. And the source book and the first campaign module are out later this summer. You can pre-order over on Patreon. Links to all that stuff are down below. Now, virtual tabletop in my mind is it's always going to be secondary to physical. Like if you can meet up in person and have a good group of people that you can meet with on a regular basis to play in person, that is always going to be the best way to play tabletop. It is obviously the original way to play tabletop, and there's a lot to be said for a group of friends hanging out in a basement or in a living room around a table with snacks and drinks and camaraderie. It is absolutely the best way to experience tabletop, but that's just not feasible all the time. Even before the pandemic, we didn't always, have people that lived in our area that could play with us. Maybe our friends moved away that we grew up with, and we still want to play with them. So virtual tabletop has been a thing for quite some time now. Now, it may not be the first one, but I know the most accessible option for most people for a long time has been Roll20. Now, Roll20's been around for quite a long time. I want to say maybe 10 years or so, and I've used it. I think we used it all the way back in like 2015 or 16. And it's a decent system. It's also the most accessible because it's free to play basically, and they have very affordable subscription rates to get in. Um, with any virtual tabletop program, there's going to be some sort of a cost, and it might not necessarily be to use the program, but you'll definitely have to buy the books. So even if you own the physical books, or even if you own the digital versions, like a PDF directly from Wizards of the Coast, you're still going to need to buy the versions for whatever virtual tabletop program that you're using, unless everyone at the table has the books themselves, physically or otherwise, and then you can kind of wing it. The reason I say this is because regardless of whether you use Roll20, the Foundry, or like Fantasy Grounds, which is what we prefer to use, there are a lot of baked in systems that take advantage of the adaptations of the books that have been built for that specific program. So I'm going to use Fantasy Grounds as an example because that's what we use, and it's, in my mind, the best program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that kind of stuff towards the end, but I want to give you an example of this. So if you own an official um, version of the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Guide, or Monster Manual with Fantasy Grounds as an example, you can load that module into the Fantasy Grounds program, and everyone can have access to that within the program. And so you have all the links and everything is at your disposal. So you can very quickly drag monsters onto the map. You can drag items into the inventory for your player characters. You can do lots of different things. Combat is largely automated so that you've got your character sheet. It knows that you're using the Sword of Doom +3, and so it's going to automatically do all those rolls for you. It's going to calculate your bonuses. It's going to calculate the damage. If there's an effect that goes on a creature, you can add the effect, and then it automatically keeps track of that through the rounds and turns system that's built into that. All that takes place. It's very, very intuitive once you've learned how to use the system. Now, if you don't own the manuals, within that system, then you're going to be doing a lot of that calculation on your own, and you won't be able to like drag and drop monsters on. You'll be able to like put an icon on the map that represents the monster, but then you'll have to manually add hit points, manually add armor class, or if you're only using it for digital maps, then you don't really have to worry about all that stuff, and you can just use these virtual tabletop programs as a dice rolling system so that your friends can get on a video call with you and you can all play remotely. You can have your maps in there and you could just do the dice rolls, but you're doing everything else like you would traditionally be doing it if you were playing around a table, i.e., you're manually keeping track of the hit points, you're manually keeping track of the monster's hit points, and all that stuff. Um, Going back to which virtual tabletop program is going to be right for you. Again, this is going to depend largely on the user interface that you want and how deep people want to dive into that rabbit hole. Roll20 is by far the easiest to learn, the easiest to use. It's free to play for almost everyone. The host, I don't even think, I haven't used it in a while, but I don't even think you have to have a subscription to host a game. But there are extreme limitations with the size of the maps you're allowed to upload and things of that nature. But you can do all sorts of stuff with custom tokens and custom avatars and all that good stuff. So Roll20 is definitely the most accessible to get into. However, um, some people like Foundry. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about Foundry, so I don't want to talk a lot about it. I know it's kind of like as far as I understand, it's the intermediate between Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds, which is what we use. Fantasy Grounds is by far the most expensive to get into. Um, you don't need a subscription or a license to join a campaign, but you do need a subscription or a license to host a campaign. And that's just going to cost you what it's going to cost you. There's various options. You just have to look at those and figure out what's the most affordable for your group. I sprung for the pro license and I just bought it outright. I didn't want to pay a subscription. I got it on a discount and it was, I got it for 25% off. They do run discounts a lot. And then I bought the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, Monster Manual, and the Lost Mine of Phandelver campaign to get us going. And that was us. The reason we've been playing Lost Mine of Phandelver the past 3 or 4 months is because we wanted to learn Fantasy Grounds, and what better way to learn it than using an official campaign? And then now that we're into the middle of 2022, we're switching over to the Weave and the Void, which we're still going to be using Fantasy Grounds, but we're going to be doing a lot more of our own maps and customizations and everything else. But since we already own the Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and Dungeon Guide, we're ready to roll right into our own campaigns now. I like the automation of combat that Fantasy Grounds has, but not only is Fantasy Grounds the most expensive to get into, it's not the most user friendly. It requires a lot of learning to learn how to use Fantasy Grounds. They have great tutorials. They're constantly doing live streams on their YouTube channel. They're constantly working on it. It's a great program. Um, Once you learn how to use Fantasy Grounds, it's the reason I think it's the best is because all the automation that comes with combat. So, like I said, it knows what sword you're using for your character and what bonuses it should be applying and how it should be affecting different monster types based on their immunities, so on and so forth. It's got the combat tracker so that when you start a combat encounter, it's keeping track of the rounds and the turns so that if someone casts a sleep spell, it's automatically going to keep track of how long that should last, and it will automatically, finish whenever it's supposed to wear off. There's a lot of really cool features with that. Line of sight with the maps, which you can also do in Roll20. So VTT is very good because it allows people to join together from anywhere in the world and come together and have a virtual space. It's also really good even if you're just coming together in your you can this is the cool thing about VTT. It's also useful for when you're in your own space because a lot of people have built these tables where you have a big TV monitor set into the table and the players will sit around that and then people as the DM will have their tablet or their laptop over by the where they're DMing from and they'll have all the maps right there on the table for players so they don't have to go out and draw these big parchment maps. It can actually design these maps in the programs or in Incarnate or somewhere else, and then upload them to their favorite VTT program, and then boom, right there on the map, right there on the big screen, they've got the map for everybody, and then people can put their tokens on there, and then you can roll your dice as normal, but you can just use that for maps and things of that nature. So they're useful in all different scenarios, but there are quite a lot of VTT options out there. There's other newer ones coming out like Tailspire. I know it's aspiring to be a VTT alternative. I don't think it's there yet. Um, but again, if ease of use is your number one priority, I would highly recommend Roll20. Especially they have a new CEO now as of I think this February or March of 2022. The new CEO just did a big press release and said his number one objective for 2022 and moving forward is creating a whole slew of new user tutorials to make it even more user friendly for people who have never played VTT before. So it's a good time to be getting into Roll20 if you've never done so before. But for my money's worth, I'm always going to recommend Fantasy Grounds. It's what we use, so on and so forth. Um, Now let's talk a little bit more about our project because this is the chance I get to plug this. Um, Not only are we building our own 5th edition world, we have our source book and the campaign mods and everything else. We also have map packs because I'm building maps for our campaign world, but we also sell those map packs individually as agnostic maps. We have 2 map packs already up on the Patreon page. We have a 2K map pack for people who just want to have really cool agnostic maps for their campaigns. There's dungeons, sewers, cities, taverns, battleground maps, so on and so forth. And then we have the 8K versions of those, which are for people who have their own home setting where they're using the television in a table setting. They want those big 8K maps. So you can buy those individually. You can also pick those up via a subscription when you subscribe over at our Patreon page at the Dungeon Master tier for $15 a month. If you subscribe for 4 months, you get our tabletop books included on top of all the map packs and everything else that's included in that subscription. So I would highly urge everyone to go check all that stuff out. Links are down below to that kind of stuff. So hopefully we'll see you over in Patreon as well. Don't forget if you like this video, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, all those good things. And hopefully we'll see you over in Patreon, in Discord, or in the next video. Safe gaming, everybody. Until next time, have fun.